Hi, I'm Jessica Evans with Love of DC here in Washington, DC. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about closing costs. So closing costs are one of the topics that a lot of buyers and sellers have questions about during a transaction for good reason. You're paying money for things and you want to know what you're getting and you want to know what it's going to cost. That all makes a lot of sense. So today I wanted to take a little bit of a deeper look into what are closing costs and share some additional information. So closing costs are a variety of different fees and charges that are typically paid at closing, which is why they are called closing costs. It is not a single fee or payment. It is just a name given to a lot of different fees and charges coming from a variety of different places that are all paid at one time, which is why they're called closing costs. Typical closing costs in a real estate transaction for a buyer would include any costs or fees associated with their financing. So that could be the appraisal, loan origination fee, any costs associated with insurance, whether that's title insurance or homeowner's insurance. For sellers, the biggest closing cost is the commission. That is typically paid at closing in the form of closing costs. And for both, we always have a transfer recordation tax, which is paid to the jurisdiction or state where the property is located. And that is also a big percentage of the closing costs. So one of the questions that we get a lot about closing costs is, well, if it's a buyer, they'll say, well, can the seller pay my closing costs? And I always think what's important to keep in mind with this is that both parties have their own closing costs. Now they're different and they're going to be different amounts and different fees, but each party has their own closing costs. And so it's not customary for one party to pay all of the closing costs. Now, what we do see with buyer transactions instead is that a buyer will request a seller credit to cover closing costs, and that is reflected in that net sales price. And so it's not really that the seller's paying for it, the buyer's paying for it, but it's just getting wrapped up into their mortgage instead of being an upfront expense. And so I think that's the best way to look at closing costs and credits. It's not typical for a buyer to pay a seller's closing costs, so that's not a scenario that we see frequently. How to know what your closing costs are going to be? I think we can always say in different jurisdictions, I have like percentages of, okay, if you're a buyer, you're looking at approximately this percent or that percent as a seller. But in general, for buyers, the best source of an accurate estimate for your closing costs, if you're in the exploration phase, is going to be to ask your lender, because they know what all of your loan charges are going to be. They know if you're paying points to buy down your rate, and they're going to be able to give you a pretty exact number. For sellers, your real estate agent can prepare what's called a seller net sheet and estimate what your closing costs are going to be. So hopefully you found this helpful. If you have any questions at all about closing costs, please feel free to reach out and I would be happy to help.